When I was younger, something that my friends and I would love to do was take a bunch of different board games and combine them together and play them all simultaneously in one big abomination of games. These games never made any sense and were never balanced. But I got thinking about them again recently. And I was thinking about them in the context of my newfound interest in trading card games. And I was wondering, what if you took a deck of a trading card game and removed all deck building restrictions, including the one that is often unwritten and unspoken, that all the cards in the deck need to be from the same game? What if you could build the deck of a card game with any card ever made? And thus, the project that I have been referring to as Card Games the Gathering was born. First, before I explain how to play this game, I need to form the foundation. When I was developing this game, I realized that I needed something to build off of to make mechanics make sense. And so there are 3 different games that form the basis of Card Games the Gathering. The first and largest of these, which is probably obvious from the name, is Magic the Gathering. Magic has by far the most flexibility and variety in card effects, so there are rules for pretty much anything, and if you can reword a card effect from a completely different game into Magic the Gathering style formatting, it can often just make sense and be played like that. I'll go into more detail in the future about every card game that I own and how exactly those games interact with Card Games the Gathering, but for the most part, you just interpret stuff in the style of Magic the Gathering because Magic has so much information out there about all the rulings ever. The second of these base games is the one that is meant to represent all styles of card games where you simply play cards on a pile in the middle of the table. Because these games are just very common. And I figured the best game to represent this style of games and to build the foundation for them is probably the most iconic and one of the most simple. Uno! I'll go more into how Uno is incorporated later, but for now, no, that is one of the bases. The third of these bases was the most complicated for me to figure out because I wanted some way to incorporate one of the biggest variety of games out there that have cards included, and that's board games. There needed to be a board in this game in order for things to interact with. This board, though, needed to fulfill some certain requirements. The first of these is that it needed to be a really simple game that doesn't actually require much strategy in and of itself, because I want all the strategy to come from the deck that you build and the cards that you bring to the table, not the stuff that is incorporated throughout the game as it goes on without your express intention. The second, I need this game to interact back with the card game portion of it, because if it doesn't, then there's no reason to build a deck around manipulating the board. And the third is I want physical spaces that pieces can move around on, because so many board games that have cards that move a piece around a board. And so thus there needs to be a clear forward and backward direction, as well as physical spaces that you can move on. The game that I came up with that fulfilled all these requirements was the Game of Life. This game is incredibly simple. You just spin the spinner and move your piece, do what the space you land on tells you to do. Extremely simple. And while it doesn't expressly interact back with the rest of the card game, I came up with a pretty smart solution, if I do say so myself, because life has money in it. And money is used to pay for things. You know what else you have to pay for in card games, especially trading card games? Card costs, such as mana costs or attack costs. So I figured, let's let players spend money on costs on their cards. I'll go more in detail about how you actually do that later, but for now, no, this is the third base of Card Games the Gathering. To set up this game, the first thing that you're going to want to do is set up a life board. Make sure it's in a area that all the players can reach, set up the bank for the money and cards as you see fit, and everybody should have a game piece that they choose which path to put on. Basically, set up the game of life according to the specifications of the rules of the specific version of life that you are playing with. The next thing you're going to want to do set up is put an Uno deck in the middle of the play area and flip over the top card of it to start the Uno pile. Personally, the way that I like to set up the Uno deck is by shuffling together the number cards regular wilds from regular Uno deck and specifically from the dark side of Uno flip deck, also the number cards and regular wilds. That way you have more color variety, and effect cards will be put in the player's decks that they build, not drawn from random chance. That way there's more player agency and more player intention in what happens throughout the game. For setting up the game, one other thing you'll need is some way to track values of cards that can change. Typically I just use dice for that, but you can use pretty much anything as long as you understand them and can track them well. The next thing you're going to want is a regular deck of cards and a d4, or some way to randomize between 4 different options. I will get into the casino later. Now, let's get into what a turn actually looks like in Card Games: The Gathering. Turn structure is very similar to Magic: The Gatherings, with some few additions. First, on any of your turns, is the life step. You spin the spinner, and move your piece however many spaces it tells you to move. Do whatever the space tells you, gather any cards, money, whatever, put them in your life zone, which is just a zone outside of the battlefield that you can store your money and cards from life. Next is the standard untap, upkeep, draw steps. Those normal untap all permanents you control, resolve all effects that happen at the beginning of your turn or during your upkeep, and then draw a card. Next is your first main phase, where you can play whatever cards you want as long as you can fulfill the requirements for playing them. Something else, though, that you can do during your main phases is use money. Earlier I said that money can be used for card costs, but how do you do that? Well, I wanted you to be able to interact with somebody doing this, so instead of just making you straight up spend money to get mana, you spend money in exchange for a treasure token. With your playgroup, depending on which version of life you're using, they have different speeds at which you acquire money, and so different prices for how much a treasure token actually costs. But once you get a treasure token, you can use it as a normal treasure token. Though, I would like to point out something. On a treasure token, it says add 1 mana of any color. Well, what's a color in Card Games: The Gathering? In Magic, there are 5 colors. White, blue, black, red, green. Often referred to with the acronym WUBRG. White, blue, black, red, green. WUBRG. Well, in Card Games: The Gathering, there's more than just that, because I want to be able to incorporate other games than just Magic. So when a treasure token says add 1 mana of any color, or any other card effect refers to any color, there are more colors than just WUBRG. There's also Pockeys. Purple, orange, pink, yellow, silver. So now the acronym instead of WUBRG is WUBRG Pockeys. Hope that makes sense. After your first main phase, you go into your combat phase. I'm not going to explain the intricacies of the combat phase here. Instead, I am going to talk about how every individual game works within the combat phase in the videos dedicated to all the games that I own. After combat phase, you have a second main phase. Same as the first main phase, it just happens after combat. After your last main phase, normally in Magic, you would go into your end phase. But first, before that, in Card Games: The Gathering, you have your Uno step. During the Uno step, you are required to play from your hand a card onto the Uno pile that matches the top card of the Uno pile in either number or color. So, for this example, you have a red 4. So you could play Fanatical Firebrand, for instance, because it is a red card. For context, the value of this card is 1, so this is a red 1. You don't need to match just in color, though. You could play Spectral Reserves. It's a white 4. If, for whatever reason, you cannot play on the Uno pile, because you don't have anything that matches in color or number, you must draw from the Uno deck. Cards you draw from the Uno deck stay in your hand and count towards your maximum hand size. However, the only way to get rid of Uno cards drawn from the Uno deck is by playing them on the Uno pile. This rule is here to incentivize you to avoid getting Uno cards, because in Uno, you want to get rid of your Uno cards. But in other card games, you like drawing cards, and so I needed some way to make drawing cards from this a downside. So they fill up your hand and basically lower your maximum hand size until you can play them on the Uno pile. Speaking of maximum hand size, after the Uno step is the end phase. During the end phase, first you resolve any effects that happen at the end of your turn or during your end phase. Then you check to see whether you have more than 7 cards in your hand, and you discard cards down to 7. The only cards you cannot discard this way, as I stated, are Uno cards. So that's what on your turn playing the game looks like, minus me actually showing exactly how to play cards, because I will go over that in more detail in each of the dedicated videos I have for the various games. There is one phase, though, that exists between any player's turn, and that is the casino phase. The casino phase occurs not on any player's turn, but between the last player in the turn order's turn and the first player in the turn order's turn. Nothing can be cast at instant speed during this because it is not on any player's turn at all. In order to do the casino step, first you roll the d4 for the casino and know its result. You don't necessarily need a d4, just some way to randomize between 4 different options. And every time you roll the d4, you then pass the casino d4 onto the next player in the turn order, and then they will roll the d4 on the next casino step. The outcomes on the d4 indicate which casino game will be open during that casino phase. If you roll a 1, the game is poker, Texas Hold'em specifically. If you roll a 2, blackjack. If you roll a 3, roulette, and if you roll a 4, whoever rolled the die gets to choose which of the 3 games is open during that casino phase. To play blackjack and roulette, at least one player needs to opt in to playing. Anyone can opt out or opt in as they please. In order to play poker, at least 2 players need to opt in. Roulette is the simplest one, so I will explain that first. In order to play roulette, everybody puts in some bet that they want to bet, and they bet on either the spinner landing on red or black, aka odd or even. Spin it. If I bet red, then I get whatever I bet in addition to the money that I put in, or if I didn't bet red, I just lose the money. I'm not going to explain all the rules of blackjack because this is pretty just similar to actual blackjack, and this isn't a blackjack tutorial, it's a Card Games the Gathering tutorial. But the only difference between this and actual blackjack is cards that the players use come from their deck. So for example, if their first 2 cards could be these, and you have a 1 and a 4. So your value is 5. You're trying to hit or stay until you get 21 or as close to 21 as you can get. The dealer's cards come from the casino deck. You want the dealer to bust or whatever. It's normal blackjack, normal splitting, doubling down rules apply. I'm not going to explain all the rules. Look up blackjack rules if you want. Just know that the cards that you are playing blackjack with are from your own deck, and then after the game of blackjack, you shuffle them back in to where they came from. Poker is the most complicated of the casino games to play. The way that I've been personally playing it is pretty much just Texas Hold'em. All players that are participating put in the minimum bet of whatever the lowest denomination in your version of life is. And then you get 2 whole cards from the top of your deck. After all players have their whole cards and have put in the minimum bet, normal betting rounds occur. You can call, raise, fold, normal Texas Hold'em stuff. And then when it's time to put the flop, turn, and the river, you randomize where the cards come from. you randomize between the decks of all the players who are participating, the casino deck, and the Uno deck. So let's say, for example, this is the flop. You have a yellow 5, a red 3, a red 6, a pink 7, and a red 5. And let's say that this was my hand. The value of this, you have a 7 and a 7, so, whoa, that's 3 7s full of 5s, so you have a full house there. It's also based on colors, so in this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4 red cards, so if this, instead of being the Pharaoh seed, was, say, a red 7, then you have a flush there as well. Whatever money is in the pot goes to the player who wins, and all cards are shuffled back into the decks that they originated. One more thing of note about poker and also about the Uno pile is that because colors are used to make flushes or whatever, or to match on the Uno pile, colorless counts as a color for the sake of those interactions. Colorless does not count as a color for card effects that specify, like, destroy a colored permanent. Colorless doesn't work with that. But for the sake of matching on the Uno pile, you can match a colorless card with a colorless card. You can't match a non-colorless card with a colorless card. Also, numberless cards exist. These, in the case of poker, cannot be used to make a straight, for instance, but they can be for, like, a pair or 4 of a kind. And then for the Uno pile, numberless being a number means you can match a numberless card with a numberless card. While I was editing, I realized that I forgot to talk about arguably the most important part of playing a game, and that is, how do you win? So on screen are 4 different ways that you can win this game. This is not a fully comprehensive list, and I'm not going to go into very much detail about these here. But reducing your opponent's life points to 0 makes sense, that's for Magic. Knock out 6 Pokemon, from Pokemon obviously. Collect 15 victory points, that's from Smash Up specifically, but there are a bunch of other games that require victory points. That value of 15 might change, I don't know, I'm still balancing that. And then controlling 7 unicorns from Unstable Unicorns. Again, this isn't a fully comprehensive list, and I'm going to go into more detail about all the win conditions in the specific videos about the respective games that they come from. So, yeah, that's the bare bones basics of how to play Card Games The Gathering. As I keep saying, I will make future videos about specific games and talk about them in the context of Card Games The Gathering, so look forward to that. But for now, catch you later.